Welcome to this episode of the Greenprint podcast series. This podcast is exploring how Europe can build a competitive, sustainable, and just economy. Today, we dive into one of the most pressing challenges of our time. How can Europe maintain its competitive edge while advancing ambitious decarbonization goals? The von der Leyen Commission has championed the Green Deal, yet businesses face the dual challenge of cutting emissions while staying globally competitive. With the Draghi report and the Clean Industrial Deal, but also Omnibus, shaping the landscape, we ask ourselves what needs to happen for Europe to lead the global clean tech race. My name is Brecht Seifi, and joining me today are three esteemed experts who will bring some unique perspectives on this transition. First and foremost, Mario Nava is the Director General of DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. He is overseeing the European Commission's efforts to shape a resilient and inclusive labour market. With extensive experience in the European economic policy, he plays a key role in steering Europe's workforce through the twin transitions of digitalization and sustainability. In this discussion, he will reflect on the Commission's vision for employment, the evolving labour market dynamics, and the social implications of the green transition, highlighting policies and initiatives designed to ensure that no worker is left behind in Europe's industrial transformation. Secondly, we have Mirella Cerutti. Mirella is a Vice President for Central and Eastern Europe at SAS Institute. She is leading the company's efforts in driving digital transformation across industries. With deep expertise in artificial intelligence, data analytics, and business innovation, she is at the forefront of helping organizations to adapt to technological change. And last but definitely not least, we have Carlo Chiattelli. He is a partner at Ernst & Young and a leading expert in public policy, specializing in labor market dynamics and regulatory frameworks. With extensive expertise advising governments and businesses on employment strategies, he brings valuable insights into the evolving European labor landscape. Mario, Mirella, Carlo, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to begin by something that came through in the past weeks, months, which is really to truly understand Europe's industrial and economic future. For that, I would say some key insights that were delivered was starting with the Draghi and the Letta reports. This set the foundation for Europe's competitive strategy and identified some key structural weaknesses. The Omnibus regulation was addressing the financial and investment challenges in the green transition. The European Commission recently unveiled the very important Clean Industrial Deal. Now, what is super important is that the Clean Industrial Deal is really a comprehensive strategy aimed at accelerating the transition to a sustainable and competitive industrial landscape. This initiative seeks to bolster European industries by promoting green manufacturing, ensuring energy security, and fostering circular economic practices. I would like to start, Mario, with you. What is your assessment of the European Commission's Clean Industrial Deal? And do you think this could be the push that Europe needs to boost our competitiveness and green transition?
Good morning, everybody, first of all, and thank you for having me. The reply is simple. Yes, I do. I'm a commission official. So I'm part of those who have made this. So obviously, I believe into that. But let me articulate it slightly more. We need to understand where does it come from and what is the Clean Industrial Deal. Every 5 years, at the beginning of the mandate, the Commission does what is called the 100-day strategies. The 100-day strategy is what defines then the rest of the mandate. 5 years ago, you evoked it. The 100-day strategy was the Green Deal. And we launched the Green Deal. We had 5 years which were very intense because in addition to green and digital transition, we had COVID and war. And we learned a lot during those periods. And we learned what may be the obstacles to the Green Deal. You already evoked one, which is the social one, the social transition and making sure that the Green Deal and the digital transition and transitions in general do not leave anybody behind. Not for nothing. In many countries, the job transition, the work transition is taken care, for example, by the trade unions. In the north, in Sweden, in Denmark, are the trade unions who take care of the job transition. Now, this von der Leyen II mandate, the the first 100 days, let's say the mother document is called the Competitiveness Compass, which derives from the Draghi and the Letta report that you also mentioned. The Competitiveness Compass says three things. Says we do need to improve our innovation abilities, so to close the innovation gap. Two, we need to decarbonize, and therefore it's a prosecution of the Green Deal. And three, we need to make sure that we are strong in those things that are needed in the new geopolitical context. And I leave it at this beautiful sentence, but as you know, it hides things which are less nice. Now, the Clean Industrial Deal is below the Competitiveness Compass, is one of the results of the Competitiveness Compass, together with other documents of which, if you want, we'll talk later, like the Union of Skills or whatever. What does it say, the Clean Industrial Deal? The Clean Industrial Deal is really the strategy for decarbonization. So is the title of your podcast, is the Greenprint, is the strategy for decarbonization. And it looks in particular at three important objectives. Make sure that the Europe potential is got in full for the industrial side, boost the competitiveness, and make sure that our role in leading the green transition remains prominent. Europe should not be shy to know and to say that he is the world leaders in green transition. We have been the world leaders definitely since the COP in Paris nearly 10 years ago. It's important to underline that the Clean Industrial Deal has not been drafted in any dark room of the Berlaymont in Brussels or wherever else. It's something that comes after that business leaders and trade unions presented the Antwerp Declaration a year ago under the Belgian presidency. That was the result, if you want, of a very intensive dialogue with all the stakeholders in order to do the two things: to ensure a good industrial development, and on the other hand, to maintain our leadership in green transition and make sure that we advance into that. The Clean Industrial Deal, as I said, aims at decarbonization, but it has a series of concrete proposals. It pushes on the renewable, of course. It pushes on all the matters that can make Europe stronger. In that area, security of supplies, creating new and good jobs, good quality jobs, and we may come back to that, and ensuring climate goals, it's the purpose.
And that's very interesting to see indeed that the Commission now says, okay, well, we need to decarbonize. It's very important, but we need also to give the tools to the companies to do that and the framework. So that's a very important one. So Mirella, over to you, because you are working with the customers on a daily basis. Competitiveness, the Clean Industrial Deal, is it something which you're hearing often when you have these conversations, when you are at the boardroom? What is their perspective? Can you maybe give us some insights on that?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Brecht, to invited me. And is really important in this moment, this topic, because I think that, as Mario said, that is important to see the sustainability and decarbonization related not just a statement, but also related to the internal process of the customer. In my region in particular, we see different position in different countries, because you see from Germany to East Europe, but it's important to understand that they realize that the usage of data and analytics could help them to, let me say, revise what we can do and what we can achieve, not just in terms of sustainability, this is an important part, but also in terms of profitability. So if you work in this way, let me say, we reach both the goal, and I see customer really very, very pushing us also to work with them to have this kind of result. I give you just some example, just to give you the flavor of the situation. We work a lot with the manufacturing area in particular, and I would like to speak about a customer in Austria that they want to reduce the emission, first of all, but also to optimize the energy utilization, because it now is a very big topic, because the cost of energy is a high, an important part of the balance sheet of our customer. And with the usage and insight of artificial intelligence analytic, we were able to bring result, but in particular, we were able also to see how the customer optimize the internal process to have also more benefit than expected. And in two dimensions, why optimization of the process, and also to understand which kind of skills, and I come back to the Mario point, they need to have this kind of transformation, because real is a digital transformation. We are working a lot also in other topics. Carbon Copilot, at the moment, is a very important topic, because there is a tension now in the decarbonization in the market for the emission and to be compliant with CBAM regulation. So it's very important in this moment also for us that we work with all the data, not just internal data of the customer, but to combine all the external data. And for external data, I mean carbon market data, emission data, pricing data, and so on, to create different scenarios where the customer can see how could be the impact if they take a decision, or one decision or another decision. For example, to import goods from one side or to delocate the production. So this is really important for them to have also in the part of the balance sheet the right investment, first of all, but also the right return. So this is really two examples that we are working on in the region, and that I think that in the next few years will be very, very important.
That's an interesting perspective, because now we are seeing how technology could play a role in decarbonizing in a smart way. You mentioned already AI. You mentioned different skills. So that means if we would like to do the transition in a smart way, we need also different skill sets, probably. And that means a change in the labor market. So, Carlo, question to you. What does the latest research indicate about the current trends in the labor market demand across industries and geographies?
Well, speaking of data, data only lead to meaningful analysis when they are based on robust concepts. So is the concept of green jobs, that's the most common parlance in the literature, really robust? And the truth is that there's no universally accepted definition of green jobs. Most statistical work that's been done in the last few years is based on either output-based or process-based definitions, but these lead to inconsistent results. For instance, occupations might be considered green even if they do not lead to the production of sustainable goods and services, or in cases in which the processes leading to these productions are not necessarily sustainable. So the most interesting and recent literature on this has tried to move away from this and take a more nuanced view, a more holistic view on what green jobs are really about. And that is a definition that's based on skills, on tasks, and that's some of the work that the European Commission is doing on this, CEDIFOP in particular. The ESCO classification now distinguishes skills based on their degree of sustainability, for instance. So if we look at the more recent, reliable comparative data that we can show, first of all, they're not very recent. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, even though, of course, this is a medium or long-term process. So I think they're still relevant. But some of the more interesting work has been done by the OECD, which adopts exactly this kind of more nuanced definition. They break down occupations, to break down jobs into tasks, and classify green jobs as those jobs whose tasks are green above a certain threshold. Let's put it this way, just to simplify. And what they observe is really quite interesting. There's huge variation across countries in the OECD area, which of course is a bit broader than just the EU, but also within countries. So we see, for instance, of course, green jobs will be concentrated in particular in some areas of the EU, Nordics, the Baltics, but also in France, outside of the EU, in the UK. Hungary is another one, for instance. But also there's a lot of areas, as I said, within countries across regions. And what you can see there is the green jobs tend to be concentrated in particular in higher income regions, sometimes, a lot of times actually around capital cities or large cities. The green jobs tend to be concentrated, for instance, among more highly qualified occupations. And if you look at the sectoral level, that's also very interesting. The picture is quite complex because you have high concentrations of green jobs in sectors that are linked to the green transition, and then that's sort of to be expected. Water management, energy, that includes waste management, even the financial sector with the trend in green finance that's been a bit of a fad until at least a few weeks ago. But also you have high concentrations in green jobs in sectors that are traditionally energy consuming or even bluntly polluting, construction, mining, and so on, and manufacturing, of course, and so on and so forth. And that's a trend towards sector greening that's also evolving and needs to be analyzed. And what all of this says, just in a few words, is that this process is not neutral. I mean, we will see how fast it's going, as far as we can tell. But the other thing is this process is not neutral. It's got redistributional consequences, and that's where public policy, of course, has to play a role.
That's an interesting angle, because my next question would be for Mario, being the transition. And I think Carlo already touched upon some of the potentially negative consequences. If we transition from that brown capital towards more green capital, brown industry to green industry, what do you see as the biggest challenges, but also opportunities? And how do you think the Commission could play a vital role in shaping that future?
Yeah, no, I really would like to start where Carlo left it, because that's a crucial point. We need to be very clear to the people and say to them that by default, by chance, the transition will not be fair. And economics works like that. So unless you have public policy intervention, the transition risks to be unfair and risks to make the society more divergent in a way, because some categories may be privileged in the transition and others may be less privileged in the transition. So there is an obvious need of public policy intervention. Which type of public policy intervention is in need? I would say it's a mixture or a sum, if you want, of both labor policy, social policy, and industrial policy. So let me start with labor policy, active labor market policy. There the work is clear, and is the work on skills and the formation of skills. Carlo mentioned CDFOP. CDFOP means Centre du Développement de la Formation Professionnelle. It's an agency of us, of DG Employment, which is based in Thessaloniki and is the oldest agency in Europe. And what it does is that it really looks at the development professionnel, at the professional development of the people. It makes a sort of listing of the skills which are most in need, those who are most in shortages, and facilitates, therefore, a better preparation of people towards those skills. There are courses, there are different areas that can be energized in order to make that. But I think starting from the skills shortages and the skill demand is the first point. Then the second point, of course, is the social considerations. Not everybody at every step in life and in career may be able to transition from a brown job to a green job. If you have ever visited a plant producing energy from fossil fuel, you realize that some of the jobs are difficult to transform, and some of the workers may need a longer time to transform. So it's clear that in addition to active labor market policy, we should not discard that there may be some social policy for a given moment, always with the intention, of course, to going back to the labor market, because one of the beautiful thing of Europe is that in the last 10, 15 years, and maybe we'll come back to that, but in the last 10, 15 years, the labor market in Europe has improved dramatically. And now we have a target of an employment rate of 78%. The average in Europe is about 76. Several countries are above 80, 82% of employment rate. So it's clear that people will find their way back into the labor market, but exactly because the labor market is more exacting now, is more intense, you need that they have the exact time to prepare for the labor market. And then there is the industrial issue. It's very clear that some industries, in particular those based on fossil fuel, on energy intensive, and so on and on, will be less privileged under all aspects, from financing to perspective to whatever, in the next many years. I mean, if you want to construct your pension, you wouldn't invest probably your savings in a fossil fuel if it needs to pay a pension to you in 2070. In 2070, you are looking at something which is, of course, green, renewable, and so on and on. All of these, so there is a transition among industries, and inevitably there is a transition among regions, because it's clear that industry, by definition, by the nature of our economic system, some regions may have seen a concentration of industries which are now being transitioned to something else. So I think the territorial approach should never be missing, because it's clear that in some regions there may be a stronger emphasis, both in the positive and in the negative. What Mirella mentioned about Austria is a very clear example of a positive concentration of renewable energy, which therefore is likely to become a magnet for jobs.
So it's very clear that in a transition, per definition, there are winners and there are also, I would say, losers. But the losers, in a sense, how can we guide those losers from this specific transition towards becoming more changed and making them more equipped to do that transition? I think that the Commission has some actions that they took in order to mitigate that. Now, we are having today a panel with 3 Italian people, so I would like to be very concrete, and I always love to come up with a use case to make it very tangible. So that's why in my preparation for the podcast, I went looking in some statistics about Italy, and allow me to read some of the highlights, and then I will ask both Carlo and Mirella about their personal experience and also the analysis that both people did in analyzing what the current status is of Italy. So Italy remains a powerhouse in European manufacturing. They're contributing for 14% of the European Union's total industrial output, which was for me a surprise. It's a severe and strong player still in the European landscape, and it's accounting for 60% of Italy's GDP. Now, the country is home to over 385,000 manufacturing firms, employing nearly 4 million people, and that's around 20% of the national workforce. The key sectors driving this trend include machinery, metallurgy, chemicals, and automotive. Really, the industries that are currently debated as kind of impacted or not impacted. Now, despite its industrial footprint, Italy faces some structural challenges. The median age, because demography is also something that we need to tackle. The median age of its workforce is around 46.5 years old, making it one of the oldest in Europe, while the birth rate has declined to just 1.2 children per woman. So the fertility rate is quite low. It's also below the European average of 1.5. Now, next to this demographic trend, we see also a slower startup growth, 2.3% annual increase compared to the European average of 4%. So So all this to set the scene. But at the same time, Italy's heavy industries, and Carlo mentioned already, the heavy industries are most hit by the Clean Industrial Act and this transition, is the steel sector alone emits over 20 million tons of CO2 annually. And other high emission sectors include cement, chemicals, and these industries are now under significant pressure to decarbonize with, of course, regulations like the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, pushing for cleaner production methods. Now, given this backdrop, and it was a kind of long introduction, what I would like to ask Carlo, how significant is the green skills mismatch in Italy? Because we are seeing these transformations. Is Italy currently equipped to make that transition? And are the education and training systems equipped to meet the demand of those green skills and jobs?
Well, the easy answer is no, but let me just elaborate. Well, of course, I mean, Italy is an outlier with respect to EU averages on many data points. But in this particular aspect, I think it's quite nicely representative of a broader point that I will try to make in a few minutes. But first of all, labor demand in Italy has been growing for a number of years, right? We're going through a period of prolonged employment expansion that started before the pandemic and before many commentators even realized. You know that employment data are published monthly, right? So every month, employment rates go up, and we've now reached the highest levels since this indicator was even recorded. Unemployment is going down, even among the young, and employment among underrepresented groups is growing faster than the average, particularly among women. Even though employment rate in general, but particularly employment rate among women in Italy is the lowest in the EU. So it's still, I mean, there's things are evolving in sort of a nice way. But what we also know at the same time that's creating the sort of aligning the Italian labour market to some of the sort of less positive developments that we have been observing across Europe. For instance, the rate of unfilled vacancies is spiking up. It used to be much lower than the EU average, and now it's quite close to it. It's almost doubled since before the pandemic. The share of vacancies that are considered hard to fill by companies is also above 50% now. That's lower than many other EU countries with more dynamic labour markets, but it's still very significant. I think, and in general, shortages are emerging across sectors, and that's also due to the fact that demography is also starting to play a role. We have now the largest number of people at work in Italy ever in history, nearly 24 million, but still not enough. That's the point, and the reason for that is obviously something that we can comment some other time, but it's obviously very interesting and partially unexplained. What we can also see, coming back to green jobs, is that the number of vacancies concerning green jobs have been growing in the last few years faster than vacancies for non-green jobs. I mean, the longitudinal series of data here is quite short, and it's still prone to data glitches. For instance, it seems to have gone down in 2024, but it's probably not structural. But we can see the demand for green jobs has been growing faster than for all other jobs. So the interesting question, as you put it, is: are the education training system trying to adjust, trying to measure up to this challenge? So what we see, and here we crunched a few data for today, is that, and these are open data from the Ministry of Education, the supply of green type courses or degrees in upper secondary and tertiary education, both academic and non-academic, has been going up, and that's very interesting. But it's been growing in line with a broader trend towards the differentiation and expansion of education supply. It's not been growing more than that, more than the average. So I have charts here that I can give you, and I mean they're actually quite ugly, but because I've had to do them fast. But what you can see there is that the share of green, let's say green courses or green type degrees within the broader academic offer is just above 20%, and it stayed about there for the last five years. Same thing with tertiary non-academic, so vocational tertiary education, right? Istituti tecnici superiori. That's much higher. It's above 60%, but that's also been stable. At the same time, demand's gone up. So what you can also see is that the gap is growing on all degrees of education that are relevant to this. So is Italy representative of the broader situation in the EU in this? I would need a much broader database to say that with some degree of certainty, but I've tried to look at France, similar size, right? And there also you see that the number of courses, diplomas and degrees on green type skills, and of course we take the descriptions of those courses, right, as a databases, has also been going up about 25% in absolute numbers, and the number of graduates has also been going up a bit less than that, but demand has spiked. So you see for green jobs, for instance, in France, those that are considered hard to fill, the vacancies that are considered hard to fill are almost 70% now. So it's again. That's obviously a big issue for public policy, and that's one of the issues that the Union of Skills, which Mario just mentioned earlier, is going to have to be working on, and it's definitely one of the priorities that I mentioned.
That's a very interesting analysis. Also, in the preparation for the podcast, I was looking in some studies and some numbers. Is it, according to you, just on a personal note, do you see it as a structural challenge for Europe? The demographic evolution? Is that something that we need to be aware of? That it is something which happens at the baby boom generation. My parents, they are all now going on pension. It's a huge amount of the population that is going on pension, of course. It's a void that they leave behind. And of course, the demographic trend is what it is. So do you see, from your expertise, do you see there a structural challenge for Europe in the next 10, 15, even 20 years?
Well, it's actually going to be a structural challenge until at least the year 2100. That's where the projections go. And the thing is, it's no longer just a problem for Southern Europe. It's been a Southern European issue for about a couple of decades, but now it's evident that it's an issue everywhere. And the solution to that, there's obviously many. One of them is technology, and the fact that AI can automate or replace some human labor is actually an opportunity here. It's not just a risk. So it needs to be looked at in a bit more of a complex, I think, more nuanced way. But we will also need a more job-rich society. We will also need to have more people at work in a structural way. We will need to become more similar to Japan, even in this respect, not just because we're aging fast, but because more people work, and even beyond retirement age. And this is what organizations such as the OECD and the Commission have been trying to say since the 1990s, at least.
You mentioned and touched already upon it, technology and AI, because in my economic courses at university, they always learned, like before, more people that had a work, more economic growth, but those times are over now. So it's more, how can technology, productivity boost, fill in that gap? And then we are coming towards AI and the role of AI in the workforce. So Mirella, a question to you. You lead the regions Italy, Germany within SAS. How do you see the Italian labor market evolving, and what is, according to you, the role of technology, and more specifically artificial intelligence, in helping in this transition?
Yeah, for sure, technology, in particular artificial intelligence, but analytics means analysis of data, is relevant and so important in this moment, because as Carlo said, in Italy we have a shortage of offer for many types of work, in particular green, but not also green. So in this moment we have a very transition period. Artificial intelligence, we see that could help in many areas. First of all, could help to replace some job that is not more on the market side. So we could use this kind of technology to have this new job, and to replace the job. The second point is how artificial intelligence could be introduced in the schools. And this is another topic that Carlo touched, and it's important that from the beginning of the schools, means primary school, we start to work in a different way with use more the data literacy, what we call data literacy. So we have to learn from the beginning how to use data, how to use KPI, how is the data, the numbers, and so on. So we have to enter in this kind of culture. Third, and so in all the part of the academic, the schools, primary, secondary, university, and so on, but also the istituti professionali, like Carlo mentioned. Another point, really, really important that you mentioned, that the age of the workforce in Italy is more than 46. So in this case, we have also to work a lot to reskilling or upskilling. So this is an important point, and I think that company in this moment are thinking, are doing this. First of all, we have to have the skill intelligence, so the assessment of the workforce that company has, to understand, utilizing the data, and then artificial intelligence, we come back, what they need, and how can reinforce the workforce company by company to have the skill that they need. Because this is an important point. As Mario said, not everyone could be from brown to green economy, could be moved, let me say in this way, and someone has to be or remain in the same job, or has to be, but a big part of the workforce population can be upskill. Because I think that in a particular country like Italy, we need to have this kind of activities. I see that in particular the big companies, because in Italy, as you mentioned, we have a lot of companies, but more of them are small and medium enterprises. So it's important also that we could bring to them the right instruments and the right tools to help also them in a very scalable way to use this new technology. Because it's important that we could reach directly or through the ecosystem, create an ecosystem with university, partner, and so on, to reach all the population of the SMEs, because this could change the game also in Italy. And in this moment, there is a big attention on this, and we are working a lot on these topics to have this kind of evolution of the workforce, and also to reach all the main part of the small and medium enterprise that for Italy are so important.
And that's very interesting to hear, because I'm learning here that public policy needs to give the instruments for the industry, for the society to do so, to help them to make the transition. That was Mario's point. We have to understand the numbers, and we have to see, because one can have some notions about this is the direction where it's going. But I think the studies are proving what the current status is. And of course, technology can harmonize and bring everything together. What is the direction that the governments are going towards? What is the purpose, and how can technology play a role to accelerate that?
Yeah, I just to add something. I see in the last few years a very, very improvement also in the public sector. So we are now in a moment where public sector is investing a lot to this transformation, digitalization, and introduce new technology like artificial intelligence, analytics, data analytics. So this is another point very important in this moment for the Italian market, I think.
Now, in our first episode, we had Director General, your colleague Kurt van den Berge, and he emphasized a quite pivotal notion. He mentioned that Europe's industrial future hinges on a scale or fail moment. So he underscored the urgency of Europe to organize effectively and intensively investments in clean industrial technologies, positioning the continent as a leader, as Mario also already mentioned, in the global green economy. Now, Mario, if you really focus on the clean industrial deal to ensure a competitive European and future-proof labor market, how do you think that this is going to boost that transition, and how technology is going to help towards a digital but also green economy?
Now, Kurt van den Berg is the Director General of DG Klima, with whom we are together working on the Social Climate Fund. The Social Climate Fund will be the fund that will, as we always say, is not a climate fund, it's not a social fund, it's a social climate fund. So it's the one that facilitates the transition of the most vulnerable people and companies toward the green. The Green Industrial Deal contains a number of areas, but maybe because of my work, let me highlight one that really talks to me, which is the area of skills, social considerations. In that area, we have one flagship initiative, which is, of course, the European Fair Transition Observatory that we are putting up. And it, as the name says, is an observatory for fair transition. So making sure that the transition is truly fair, because it is helped to become fair. What we want to do overall, I think, is well synthesized by the elements that are contained in the Union of Skills. In the Union of Skills, there are the reason for coming up with the Union of Skills is what Carlo said a moment ago, the growing mismatch between labor market supply and labor market demand. On the supply side, we are training people, we're doing good things, but not enough for what the demand is asking, and the demand is asking something very specific. So we have a market mismatch, and what we want to do are, in particular, 4 things that was very interesting. They have already emerged here, so I'm just summarizing in a way what has emerged here. One is basic skills. It was mentioned by Carlo, by Mirella. So making sure that schools really deliver people. As you know, after COVID, we had in Europe a going down of the PISA results. That was very unfortunate. We need to go back. Europe is strong because of its people, because of its skills. Europe doesn't have oil reserves or any other thing, right? We are strong because of our skills. Traditionally, European schools were the best of the world. We need to make sure that remains. So basic schools cannot be overestimated. They are totally important. Second thing is the upskilling and reskilling, which is what we have been talking about in the last 45 minutes here. Upskilling and reskilling needs to happen, of course, because of the public sector efforts. Just to give you 2 numbers, in 2021-2027, the European Social Fund will spend 46 billion euros to upskill 36 million people. So these are the numbers. However, public money are not enough, and companies have understood. And we have made companies, we have discussed with companies, and they came up and they signed 2 very important initiatives. One is called Pact for Skills, where we have 2,500 companies who have committed by 2030 to train 25 million people. Now, 25 million people trained is comparable to the 36 that we train with public money. So that's very good. If you sum the 2, it makes 60. So we start having a good mass of people who are continuously trained and retrained. We have also linked to the vet schools that Carlo was mentioning. We have also done another thing, which is called the European Alliance for Apprenticeship. The European Alliance for Apprenticeship really get together the technical jobs. So that's the second thing, upskilling and reskilling. Third thing is the circulation of skills. Skills, we know in a single market, this we know it since David Ricardo, the market is stronger, the larger it is. And therefore, in Europe, we have skills being generated in each country, but then being demanded by the labor market that in several cases is a European labor market. In some cases a national, but in many cases is a European labor market. And here you have people. I mean, Mirella is responsible for Germany, and Carlo, I'm sure, has lots of European competencies. So that's what it is. And therefore, we need to make sure that the legal framework for the recognition of skills, if you are a doctor in Greece, you are a doctor in Finland. If you are a ski instructor in Sweden, you are a ski instructor in France. If you are a plumber in Portugal, you are a plumber in Slovakia. We need to make sure that these skills are recognized. So that is the skills circulation. And that's the last point, which is probably the most important because it touches at the elephant in the room, which you have already uncovered, which is demography, is the point of attracting talents. And there are two types of talents that need to be attracted. One is those who are already in Europe and for whatever reason do not work, the underrepresented category. In the analysis of Carlo and Mirella was very clear. I mean, in Italy, for example, it was mentioned the Italian employment rate is at its highest ever. However, is well below the European average and well below the European target. You can look at that and say, oh my God, or you can take it as an opportunity because it means there are many people who can go back to work. And if you divide the general employment rate into different categories, so prime age male, women, people suffering disabilities, migrants, and so on and on, you realize that there are some categories which are a true gold mine of possibility of going to work. Women is a very clear example, but also people with disability, and their technology helps a lot. You ask technology. If you think the introduction of technology, the introduction of digitalization, how it has improved the employability of disabled people. I mean, big companies that before needed star demand to move packages around, now there are robots. So it's just enough to push a button, and even if you suffer from some disability and you are on a wheelchair, you push a button and you do the job that before there were three big boys doing it. So the employability of these people needs to be increased, and I think there we have a true reserve. But the truth of the matter is that the demographic numbers are there. And when Mirella and myself were born, even if Mirella looks 20 years younger than me, but when Mirella and myself were born, there were more than 1 million people born in Italy, 1,070,000. Today in Italy, there are 370,000 kids. If you look at the European demography, the most numerous cohort in Europe today is us, the 55 plus. We are the most numerous cohort. The cohort of the 25-30 were those that needs to generate the 20 years old in 20 years, so the newborn of today. The 25-30, they are few. Not only they are few, but also they are less interested in making kids than we were interested, in a way. So they are few and they make less kids. It means what? It means that in 20 years, we will have many of us who are still around because we are fit, we go on a bike, and we are all okay. So we will be there in 20 years. So the most numerous cohort in 20 years will be the 75 plus, and the 20 years. So those that will need to enter in the labor market in 20 years will basically not be there, or will be very few. So we need to think very seriously. There is the issue of legal migration that the Commission has put on the table for the labor market. Plus there is the issue, of course, of demography per se, and the fertility rate that you mentioned. But in this panorama, what is essential is that everybody is activated. At the European Council, at the European Social Council of 3 weeks ago, and it is public, member states discussed for 2 hours about the so-called silver economy. What is the silver economy? It is ways to make sure that people have the right incentives to continue working even beyond the pension age. So they may get the pension and then continue working. And several countries, from Germany to Greece to Portugal, have done incredibly interesting experiment in that direction, eliminating the penalization for those who go on a pension and continue working, and having benefit for the budget because people are happy to continue work, they contribute, and so on and on. So I think the last area, which is the one of attracting talents, both to those who are already in Europe and need to be activating and get to work, but also those who are outside Europe by the sheer force of numbers and making sure that the numbers at the end of the day square, it's probably one of the most important. The discussion on legal migration is very clearly linked to the discussion on the EU talent pool. EU Talent Pool, as you know, is the new initiative that builds up on the talent partnership. The talent partnership were national initiatives of individual member states on talent with countries in demographic excess, typically country in Africa or country in Asia. And the EU Talent Pool is something that builds on the talent partnership, but tries to put it together at a European level, exactly to facilitate the circulation of skills I was mentioning.
Yeah, you touched upon some very nice points and very interesting points. Maybe when I hear this, because the Commission is really thinking then about, we understand indeed that in 20 years, many of the baby boomers will be older, they will not working anymore.
We see.
We will see.
Maybe we will be working.
Silver economy.
But it's an interesting notion, the silver economy indeed, because if I speak to people who are at the point of going on pension, they are all saying like, yeah, I have to stop, but I would love to work a little bit longer because it keeps me young, it keeps me in touch with society. So I think that's a very interesting and positive dynamic. Maybe you personally, are you positive when you see what is happening right now? We have a demographic population which is getting older and older. Do you think that this can be changed, that society, given when we have the right policy instruments, this can be changed so that we are ready?
I think it can. And also, if you think it logically, the life expectancy in 80 years has increased by about 50%. It was 60 years just after war, and is now 90. That means that basically I'm nearly 60, but in reality I'm 40. So I'm completely positive and I want to continue going on.
Yeah, 20 years.
And Mirella, who is 45, is basically 30.
No, thank you.
Thank you for this.
Very, very interesting comments. Carlo, you're looking at the numbers, right? And given this growing need for green skills, because Clean Industrial Deal is all about let's transform our industry, let's be a leader in clean tech, it will require a different skill set. But how do you foresee the demand for such skills evolving in the labor market over the next years? And this shift, do you think it will really redefine the very nature of jobs itself?
Well, it's a bit of a big question, but let me just for a second react to one of the points that Mario just made on training funded by companies. Because there's some interesting recent data on that. Investment in particular on green skills training by companies, and I'm looking at Italy again, I'm sorry about this, just for a second, is actually increasing very, very quickly. I mean, in comparative terms, Italian companies have been proved to be a bit more resistant when it comes to investing in training for their own workers compared to the EU average for many, many years. But now that trend seems to be reversing, in particular on this specific dimension. So as many as 57%, and that's the most recent data. I mean, data on this comes from Chambers of Commerce in Italy. They do a lot of interesting work on this. As many as 57% of the companies they surveyed have reported investing in green skills training, and it's a very big number. But the other interesting data point on this is that 75% of new hires for green jobs, as we said, I mean, it's difficult to define, but anyway, 75% of new hires come from the very companies that have reported investing on green skills training. So it's an interesting, I think, information there to see how company investment and propensity to employ sort of come together and are part of the same trend. As for the future, We have been working for the best part of the last 6 years on predictive models on labor demand and skills demand. Initially, building on a method that was published by the University of Oxford. We optimized it, improved data collection, and published out of it a number of reports on the Italian labor market and on some sectors. From school teachers to biotech engineers. I'm actually presenting a new edition of our study on labor demand in the biotech sector in a couple of days in Naples. The idea there is to use machine learning first, and now we've evolved it to use AI agents to build a predictive model that will formulate different types of predictions. I won't bore you with the details, but essentially the more complex, the sort of smartest thing it does is to represent the skill set of all job profiles, of all job roles as a graph, essentially. Okay? And you can see using that, and I have charts on this, you can see how the model predicts that this graph will change. The graph is essentially a representation of the significance links between different types of competencies within a given skill set for each profession, how these change in shape and form over the period that you try to project in terms of predictive analysis, which in our case is usually about 10 years, right? So, and you can infer a lot of stuff from it in terms of risk of obsolescence of skills, how quickly will the skill set of an engineer age going forward, risk of mismatch of different types, difficulty in training and recruiting those very profiles, and we've run this model to formulate a few preliminary predictions, in particular on green jobs. We've used a definition that's similar to the OECD's. A scope of analysis is 793 job profiles out of about 814 in the fifth digit of the Eurostat classification. So 307 of these were classified as green. The rest were neutral or non-green. Let's put it that way. So what we can see is, and this is, I mean, I'm going to go through this quickly. Until the end of the decade, on average, the labor demand on the Italian market will keep growing. So on average, demand for all these three clusters of job profiles will grow, but demand for green jobs will continue to grow more quickly than the neutral and non-green. And the interesting thing is, across all levels of qualification, that you know that job profiles are classified in eight. That's the matching the ISCED classification. In 8 levels of qualification, right? So across all of them, and demand for non-green jobs will grow a lot more slowly and will start declining in the last 3 years of the decade. This is how the prediction goes. If you actually triangulate this predictive data with the share of the current workforce that's employed in all of these profiles, you see, and it's a bit of a risk map. You see that 70% of the jobs whose demand will grow very quickly, and where a very small share of the current workforce is employed, are green jobs. About 50% of those in a risk area where a lot of the current workforce is employed and demand is predicted to decrease are non-green jobs. So you see the dimension of the redistributive effort, of the sort of adjustment effort, more like, that will have to take place. This is an estimate. But we want to go much further. And I said, I'll take one more minute on this, because there's a lot more than analysis that can be done through this model. Of course, we have to collect data, comparative data across countries, and that's what we're going to do in the next few months. The fact that we are a large organization, that we're in all EU countries, obviously will help. But also, the more sort of daring sort of frontier thing for these kinds of predictive studies, of which, by the way, Cedefop obviously works on a lot with different methods, is to compare skill sets of human workers with skill sets of AI agents, not just single agents, of course, agentic mesh, an orchestration of agents by taking as a unit of analysis not just the single job profile as we are doing now, but entire processes that will be partially automated and which human workers will still be involved on. And there you can actually see, and this applies, of course, to green jobs to a very significant extent, what skills it makes sense to invest on in developing with human workers. And they will be obviously higher order cognitive skills, basic and flexible technical skills and behavioral skills, attitudes, all right? And what skills will be taken up, skills and tasks will be taken up by AI agents. This is the only way I think it makes sense to look in forward-looking terms at the phenomenon of mismatch. Because if we don't do that, what we will see is it will grow and grow and grow, and there will be no solution.
That's very interesting. So maybe from a question from a personal interest point of view is when you have these conversations with governments, that's basically data-driven policy making, you showcase them the results. Is that something that you see that these insights are being integrated? Because I see also a link to universities, because maybe a specific profile, an engineer of tomorrow, doesn't need to possess the same skills as the engineer of yesterday. So do you see that there is also a link between the forecasts and the models and the results that's coming out of your models and the integration of this into policy and also as a kind of second order effect into the universities?
To be honest with you, I see a lot of interest in using data as a way to plan the offer of education, to plan the offer of training. Of course, it's not something that's starting just now. That there are different ways in which different types of stakeholders have interacted and coordinated, and in particular, not everywhere in the same way across Europe, of course. But now, what I find very interesting is, even though these types of methods can seem very abstract and very complex, there's a growing interest in trying to apply them, and obviously, artificial intelligence has given a big boost to that. So, if anything, I see that the reasoning on this is evolving.
Mirella, AI was already mentioned. AI agents is the word of I would say, one of the words that in technology land that popped up quite often in the past months. AI literacy, because on the one side, we are trying to help people so that they have the required skills to work with AI. But what about AI literacy? Do you see there an uptake in the companies where you're working with? And when there is that gap that Carlo mentioned, but also Mario already touched upon, are there programs to cope with that, to fill in that void and to try to bring them more knowledge about working with AI so that they can use technology to their benefit to complement their already existing skills?
Yes, for sure. In this moment, there is a big attention on AI. You see the investment. If you see that, for example, in Italy, in 2 years, they doubled the investment in artificial intelligence. So this is significant of the situation and how they want to use AI. I think that AI has have to play a big role in this, because we have to, let me say, to amplify the human intelligence with artificial intelligence. So in this moment, it's really important to understand how to use in the best way AI. For this, AI literacy is so important. This kind of application could help also to understand if there are in the company the skills that they need, and how could they, let me say, improve also the presence of the skill that they need from external in some cases, but also I would like to underline this point also to with the upskilling, reskilling. This is really, really important. Another topic that maybe both Carlo and Mario take is about the how we can help, like private company, to introduce to use more in the market artificial intelligence, and which is our role. So I think that in this moment, public and private has to work together and to create the culture of analytics in general. Artificial intelligence is one of use of data or usage of data, because I think that in this moment is really important that the collaboration is more than in the past. And also with not just private, public, but also university, schools. So we have to involve all the system in this, because I think it's a big change that we have to work on. In this moment, as a company, we are like Mario said, we are called to have this, and we want to be part. In every country that I oversee, I see the need that we have to work with university to provide, but it's just an example, free software to create hackathon, to have to stimulate also with the different arguments the culture, the perception of analytics intelligence and how we could help them. Another thing that we are working on, and I think that is really important, is to teach the teacher. So this is another point, to amplify the presence. So both in the school, but also in the company, we have to have ambassador of this kind of new technology that can really spread in the organization, because it's not a technology point. This is another issue that we're working on. It's not just a technology point. It's a change point, because we have to have people, we have to create the team with people that are able to know the business, are able to understand which is the real question, the right question that we have to have with artificial intelligence. So we have to create a team also in the company that is able to leverage this possibility that we have in this moment. And our company is working in every country, in Europe in particular, with this kind of customer, but not only customer, also institution.
Maybe final question, Mario, because Europe is known to have a lot of skills. Europe is known to have the human capital. Europe has, I think, a lot of startups, but they fail, and that's what Kurt said last time, to scale. Now, the Draghi report, he brought everything together. He said there is a role for public sector, for the Commission in this sense, but also for the industry and all the stakeholders around. How do you see this intersection of, on the one side, the regulator that needs to provide the environment, and then also the role for the citizens, the role for the companies? Do you see there?
Yeah, no, clearly. I mean, over time, let's say in the whole area of skills, education, over time, I think there has been a movement in the public perception. Typically, 20, 30 years ago, skills and education was considered a public good with some private component. There was some externality, so the public sector should provide. The involvement of the private sector was really, really not there. This is a major change. And like always, when you want to do a policy, you need two things. One is money, because without money, you do nothing. And the other is governance, because without a good project, you do nothing. So in skills, I would say the money, the European money are there, and they've been there for many, many years. As we all know, the European Social Funds is the oldest fund of Europe. But what I'm really pleased is to see the engagement concrete in money and in people to educate of the private sector. That comes from the fact that you were mentioning the average age of workers. If you look for some categories, so for example, I don't know, the artisan in the luxury industry, Well, actually, the average age is much higher. And so people really see that the moment of risk of losing incredible competence that have made wealth for the last 30 years without necessarily having the same number to replace could be there. And that is exactly where the two policies that I was saying before of retaining longer, but also making sure that you train and you form a new one to come and to substitute at some point needs to come. So there, money, I would say, is very clear. The second is governance. In the Union of Skills, there is a very important part of that, which says that the European Commission will make a U27 recommendation in this semester. In the moment you enter in this semester, that means you enter in the core of the organization of economic policy in Europe. And what does it mean entering in this semester? I think that's exactly what Mirella was saying a minute ago. It's entering in the all components of a society. Certainly the public sector, speaking to schools and saying where you need to improve and so on and on. Multiplication of the teachers, that's what said, train the teacher, multiply them, make sure the message passes. Certainly the private sector, the semester through tax incentive or whatever else speaks a lot to the private sector, but also and very much academia, and in general the issue of the different areas, and not only academia, but the vet schools or the istituti tecnici superiori, which are a little bit of a mix in between. And I think that's probably, if you take the political guidelines of Ursula von der Leyen in July 2027, she spoke about we need a radical change in the Union of Skill. Now, the way through which my Executive Vice President, Roxana Minzato, has delivered that, I think the true radical change is bringing skills in the semester. And this shows that the semester, which used to be very much essentially of a fiscal instrument, to cut a long story short, has now become much more of an economic and a social instrument. We have the Joint Employment Report, we have the Social Convergence Framework, and we will now have the skills recommendation. I think this shows really how the labor market has moved a lot from being a labor market in excess supply to be a labor market in excess demand, and therefore the need to make sure that all participate. How do I see this interaction between public and private? I see it very positively. It needs to be at all level. So the private sector needs to say what skills do they need, and then there is the formation, and then it's continuous. But then the other thing is, of course, the continuous upskilling and reskilling. And when you look at the map in Europe of who does upskilling and reskilling, in some countries it's mostly public. In others, it's already moved to the private. In others, is definitely private. So I think that there again, we will have to find where is the right cursor, that may be in different point in different countries. But certainly it's a wealth. The fact that we have now the private sector coming up with the public sector, it's a wealth.
That's very interesting to hear. That indeed, it cannot come only from the regulator. It's a multi-stakeholder approach where everybody needs to take their responsibility, and together we can make this a success. Now, we covered a lot today, from macroeconomic trends to industrial competitiveness and workforce transformation. I would like to ask everyone for sharing one final message or key takeaway for the audience, because currently we are in turbulent times. Turbulent times. We have, of course, the transition. We have the clean industrial deal. We have everything which is happening geopolitically. Mario, starting with you, if there is one thing that you would like to share with the audience as a kind of positive message of hope, what would that be?
I think the fact that the European Union has been very, very consistent with its own policy. I mean, we started the green policy many years ago. We were the champion. Then we pursued at the COP in Paris. Just after the COP in Paris, you remember what happened. We were left alone. We continued. Then came von der Leyen 1. We did the Green Deal. And many things arrived. COVID, war, energy price. People expected us at some point to deflect and to say, okay, now there are more important things than the green. No way. And I think the fact that the European Union has provided a great stability to the world economy, also European elections of last year have provided Europe with a great stability, less so in other jurisdictions where the change of politics has been much more radical. So I think what I take as very positive message is that Europe is clearly the area of the world which is most stable, may not be the one growing fast, but is really the most stable and the one that in the long term, it always has a very clear perspective.
It's a very good analysis because I always learned that in times of crisis, it is something that unites Europe even more. And that's what we've seen also in the past year. Indeed, very good example with the COVID one. Carlo, same question to you. What would be your key takeaway for the audience, given the situation where we are at with the Green Industrial Deal and everything around that?
Well, I mean, we need, I suppose, better analysis to understand what's happening on the ground far better. And for that, it really comes down to three things: better data, particularly at the local level, at the sector level, and technology applied to data. I mean, the Draghi report itself speaks about skills intelligence as a way. I mean, predictive models are obviously a part of skills intelligence. They're using data to inform policy in a predictive and proactive rather than reactive way. And of course, that needs, and that's the third point, to help education training systems to mobilize much more quickly and adjust. Better analysis leads to better policy. So, I mean, I suppose academia and those of us who do research outside of the academia, that's how I see our role sort of going forward. And as I said, I mean, I see a lot more interest on the part of the public sector, regulators, policymakers, universities, to sort of pay more attention and a more, I suppose, in a more forward-looking manner to the input of analysis.
So what I hear again, it's that multi-layered stakeholder approach where we need to collaborate, because if we do it on our own island, we will not reach it. Mirella, I know you as a very positive, energetic person. What is your key takeaway or message that you would share with the audience?
Yeah, I'm normally optimistic. I think that we are in a very big transformation, and then we have to go to have a big governance also of this transformation, because as Carlo said, in this moment, data and technology are very important. So for us, like a private company, our responsibility is also to understand how they can use this kind of data in the right way, and or the technology in the responsible way. This is really important. For sure, we have a gap, in particular in the skill part. We have a mismatching for supplier and demand, but I think that we are, if all together, and like Mario said, the private, public, academy, all the ecosystem, like they call, collaborate in this and see the same way to reach our target, I think that Europe could play a very big role.
Well, the only thing that lets me is I would like to thank you all for this great discussion today. And in a world that gets more fragmented, discussions like this is really what we need from different stakeholders in the industry to unitely come up with a uniform vision. So the Greenprint podcast will be back soon with more insights on Europe's path to a competitive, secure, and sustainable future. I would say don't forget to subscribe and join the conversation. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.